In this video, we are going to look at the aggregate function in Excel. Over the years, I've discovered that this function can solve a lot of issues where people have especially errors in their data sets. And rather than going to necessarily fix all the errors straight away, you can use the aggregate function and then go back and review the errors afterwards. So, as you are aware, the aggregation is just actually a word combining things into a whole. That's the dictionary definition. And in Excel, aggregation is used in pivot tables and all sorts of summary. But the actual aggregate function gives us a lot more versatility than standard sum or average or count. The aggregate function is got three parts to it with its syntax. The first part is what actually are you doing with the data? And you can see with the yellow rows highlighted, the standard ones are the ones that I tend to use. And that includes your average and, of course, your sum. So we can sum data and we can average data and we can do anything else from this list with that data. So let's take the sum idea. First of all, the sum is number 9. It then allows us to make a selection on how we handle the underlying data. And in here, you can see that we can just ignore subtotals and other aggregate functions, but there are various options that when you do an aggregate function, you can study and think which one is appropriate for what I'm doing. I tend to use number 3, where it sort of ignores error values as well as hidden rows, nested subtotals and aggregate functions. So if you're really actively using more data and you're using some of these additional functions, it's very useful. But you can just ignore error values only. You can use A6. I tend to just use the 3 because it ignores everything, but it may not be appropriate for what you want to do. So how does the function work? So this is my data that I have. This is my data here. And you can see in here, I have a couple of errors, just very basic data, because I haven't got anything to divide that number by. It's giving me a error, a div error, nothing to divide by. So if we do a standard sum, it's going to also give us a div error because it can't add up an error. So this is where the aggregate function comes in. So if I type equals aggregate, then it says, what of the aggregations do you want to do? How do you want to collect your data together? You combine your get data. I'm doing it by summing it. So I use a 9. Then it's saying, which of these options here are we using? What are we ignoring? Like I said, I tend to use 3, but you can use whichever one that you want to. And then I go on to select my range. So I do that at the end. And you can see that despite the errors, it has actually added up that range for me. Again, I'm going to just do one more now. I'm going to do equals aggregate, and this time I am going to do a count A, which is text, and then I am going to do a 3 again, and I am going to select that range there. If you ever do your manual calculations when you are perhaps counting filtered lists, so if I do equals count and I select those 3, it's not giving me any data. So again, equals aggregate, and I am going to say I want to use count A, and I want to do this one, and I want to do that. If you ever have any problems with it, then again, you can use aggregate. So I hope that I've introduced you to a function that you can include with your data, and I'll see you next time.